Oh my. So I have been talking and my mic is muted. Technology. I am so sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. I just realized that, okay, my mic has been on mute all the while. Thank you very much. Apologies for that. I want to welcome everyone who's joined us this afternoon. Our guests are in the house and they will be introducing themselves shortly. Uh, Today's topic is a very interesting one. It's something that we are particularly interested in because of the kind of work that we do in marketing in Marketing Analytics Africa. And like the name goes, Marketing Analytics Africa, it's a brand, it's a business, it's a research and technology business that helps company optimize their marketing return on investments through expert analysis, proprietary model, and localized insights. So we deal with data a lot because we need to do a lot of research around what we do for our clients, as well as um, the insights that we have to generate for our partners. So that's about marketing. So for us, this topic and the speakers it is something that we are very, very particularly interested in. Please, a simple house rule: we are going to have our speakers get to introduce themselves and talk about their organizations and the business. Also, we are going to be taking questions towards at the later part of this webinar. So please stay with us, and if you have questions, please put down your questions. You can drop them in the comment section. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll try as much as we can to take many of those questions, as many as possible. So let me bring our guests into the studio at this time. So let's see. Okay. Hi. It's good to have you. Okay, so on this webinar today, unfortunately, uh, the National Commissioner for NDPC will not be able to join us. We have representing the National Commissioner today, we have Madam Adama, who is the head of legal for NDPC, and we also have our own Otsi. Welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me, Victor, and it's a very good pleasure to meet you, Adama.
All right, thank you. So, without taking much of our time, I'm going to start with Adama. Ada, so please tell us about NDCP and what you do, what NDCP does, and why we are having this, why it is important for us to have this conversation today. So, please, over to you.
Okay, organized by Victor and his organization. So my name is Ada. I work with Nigeria Data Protection Commission, and what we do, so it's a government body, obviously Nigeria did, yeah. So what we and our mandate is very simple. It is to safeguard the personal data of data subjects. And when we mean personal data, we basically mean personal information of data subjects. What the data subjects we are referring to is you and I, whether you are a citizen of Nigeria or you stay in Nigeria, you're resident in Nigeria. Our mandate is basically safeguarding your data, ensuring that those that actually use your data use it for the right thing and use it according to your own purpose, or well, according to the purpose for which you let them use it. That's basically what we do. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Oti.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is UkubeyInje. I am the consumer data lead for Africa at Diageo. My job basically is to manage how we utilize, including acquisition and utilization of consumer data for our marketing efforts in Diageo. This includes working with partners, technology platforms, and internal stakeholders as well to ensure that we're compliantly collecting, storing, and utilizing consumer data as well as commercial data from first, second, third-party sources to sort of power our marketing efforts across the region. And yeah, other than that, my previous experiences have also built up where I am today in terms of the utilization of data for marketing. So I'm a very big advocate of data-driven marketing for years now, and at the same time, the compliant use of data for marketing. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me, Victor.
Thank you, T. Thank you, Ada. So let's without taking much of our time, so let's go straight into the meat of the matter, right? So Ada, I'll be starting with you first, right? Why is data privacy becoming a top priority for African business, especially in today's digital economy? Why is it important?
Okay, yeah. So it's a global phenomenon. Everybody is now saying that unlike before where oil is oil, now say that oil data, personal data is the new oil. So it's the new gold, it's the new landmine. Basically because we are also as a global community, we are now phasing into the digital space. Everyone is now going digital. You have the revolutions coming in. You have the push for a lot of technologies that are just seem like it has to be driven with data. It cannot work without data. So the clamor for data protection stems from the fact that everyone is using your data. Data is basically the only thing you can use to transact successfully in our ecosystem, in the global community. So we see a lot of things that people can do with data. You see that companies are built basically on data. I don't know Diageo, but of course, from what is said about consumer data, marketing analytics, you can see that the work they may be doing is also leveraging data. So because of the great use of data and the value of data and the trust that is incumbent on people that use data, you see that regulations, regulatory bodies, governments have now started saying, okay, what do we do to ensure that this data that can get so much money to the economy is also being protected, because there's a human aspect to it. So while I'm going to be using your data for my profit, I should also make sure that I'm using your data in a way that it does not cause you harm, in a way that your fundamental rights as a person is still intact. So, and that's basically why we have so much clamor for, data in itself. That's why you have so much clamor for what's happening with people's data, how are we protecting this data. That's why you see a whole lot of laws coming out from different countries. A country, well, let's say as a continent, as African continent, you can see that 2-3 years ago, we may not have been a lot that had been on the table, but you can see that within a short space of time, we have about 40 countries out of the 52 countries in Africa already having, data protection laws. That's to show you the importance of what it is that we are doing with it. So that's really why there's so much clamor, because there's so much profit in it. But of course, there's so much harm that can be done when it's not used properly.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let me come to you, Uti. So, she's talked about the importance of data and as much harm that can be done when the right data gets into the wrong hands. You also mentioned you have a background in marketing, right? So how can businesses balance customer data collection for marketing purpose with the need to remain fully compliant with local data protection laws? Because again, we see that a lot of African countries are beginning to also take regulation, data protection seriously, and there's been a couple of laws in the past, right? So how can we create that balance between the data that is being collected for marketing purpose and also complying with local data protection laws?
Thanks for that. I think what we'll find is a lot of businesses can go from 0 to 100, from, oh, we don't want to touch data, to, oh, you know what, let's just go all in on data, and in the process, they find themselves caught in on the wrong side of regulation. The fine balance is really, um, first of all, recognizing the intent behind the collection of consumer data and the plan for what it's used for, and a good understanding of the regulation. Today, the uh, data regulation that we all work with in Nigeria, which is the NDPR, which has now been updated to the GAID, is very, very well an adaptation of GDPR, which I believe for most marketers, it's not a new concept, even though most people haven't really taken time to sort of understand it. But it's been simplified as much as possible, and even kudos to the NDPC. They've also tried to simplify it and land it clearly. There are specific rules that if marketers pay attention to and adhere to correctly, they would be, on the one hand, collecting and utilizing data compliantly. But on the other hand, there's also the consideration of the consumer themselves to ensure that they also don't feel robbed in the process of exchanging data. So I'll kind of distill it down to one, recognizing the value exchange that needs to be established between a business and the consumer that you're collecting their data, and making that value exchange very clear. So for example, if I'm going to give you consent to my cookies, are you clear about what you would do with that data, right? Which is why today we've broken it down into functional cookies, advertising cookies, performance cookies, and so on and so forth. So be clear what you're collecting my cookie data for. If you're collecting my first party data, be clear as to whether I can decide to give you or not give to you. And that way, if I give you and you are also clear of what you will do with it, then I'm happy as a consumer, and you as a business, you will remain compliant as well. And then thirdly, I think also in that whole idea of over collection versus under collection, it's always better to under collect than over collect if you want to stay compliant. I know it kind of fights with the idea of, to do better performance measurement and so on with marketing, collect as much data, but you find out that you collect a lot that you are actually not using, but you've kind of extracted that out of consumers, and it could fall in the wrong hands, and you now find yourself as a business, while you are thinking that you're doing a lot from a marketing perspective, but you are also exploiting the consumer and falling on the wrong side of the regulator. So I think the three important things consumers or businesses should do to strike that balance is, one, be explicitly clear what data you're collecting and why you need it and what you want to use it for. Be cautious not to over collect more than you need. And three, establish a very clear value exchange between you and the consumer so that they don't feel robbed and they know that they are consciously giving you that data in exchange of something, or in exchange for something of value, that they can sort of live by, knowing that you have their data for now and for future, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So there was something you said. I'm going to take you back to that, right? You said something about being careful about the kind of data that you collect, so you don't fall on the wrong side of the regulator, right? Of the law. So tell me, how does you work with Diageo? So Diageo is a global brand, so this fits. So how does a global brand like Diageo ensure that compliance with different data privacy? Again, because there are different laws across different markets, right? And you, as the head of compliance for the entire African market, have to deal with different laws within the different markets. So how does a brand like Diageo ensure compliance with different data privacy regulation across the African market while still delivering on personalized marketing?
Good question. We kind of look at data in the same way we would look at tax laws, for example. If you're a global brand, you don't use one paintbrush across multiple markets when it comes to tax laws. It varies from country to country. Tariffs and all that, they vary from country to country. So it's the same way we treat data. The regulations vary from market to market. So we have a structure internally where there is a global data privacy team. We've built a sort of privacy by design type of framework, right? So embedded in everything we do from a marketing perspective, platform development perspective, and so on and so forth. It is built with data privacy in mind, data protection, data control, and so on in mind. But when you deploy from one market to the other, you will now work with the local teams from legal to information and security management and so on and so forth to ensure that what has been built globally resonates with the regulations that exist in different markets. Adaptations are done where possible without taking a one-size-fits-all approach. Each market has slightly nuanced regulations. So, for example, while some markets we say, oh, it's fine, as far as it's not sensitive data like financial data, it's okay to take it out of the country and so on and so forth. Some will be very strict that regardless of the kind of data, you cannot just export our data. Instead, you must locate your data center within our geographical region and so on and so forth. So it will vary from one to the other. The definition of a data subject, the definition of different types of data controllers and their impact of data usage varies across countries. So we are conscious of all of this and work with local partners to ensure that we adhere while we're deploying sort of globally designed initiatives or campaigns or projects and so on and so forth.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, dear Oti. Adam, coming back to you, right? From the regulatory standpoint, what are the biggest misconceptions Nigerian businesses have around about the NDPC Act?
So I think we have to first go back to the fact that as much as we're doing a lot of good work, awareness is still low. So people do not, the users themselves, that's the data subjects themselves, they've not yet seen the value of protecting their data. So a typical example is you're talking with someone and they're like, there's no money in my account. So what are it has not given me anything really. So what are you talking about? Not giving my data out. All the data I've given, nothing has happened. There's no money for anybody to steal. So you see that people do not necessarily understand the value of what they have until something happens. So misconceptions have not necessarily been, analyzed to see what exactly is the problem that people may have with the NDPC, because awareness on its own or, knowledge about the law itself is not yet at a level where we want it to be. However, on the side of the users of the data, that's the controllers and the processors, one of the misconceptions they have about the NDP Act is that is just a law as usual. So when you go to organizations, they'll be asking you, what's the fine? What's the penalty? Is it enforceable? And we've seen that this misconception has, gradually started changing, because
I think
you now had
I think Ada is having a network glitch. Hi, Ada.
Where you see.
Hello, Ada. Okay. All right.
Hello.
Sorry.
Am I being heard?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We're having a network glitch at some point. We couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh, apologies. I think I noticed that too. So as I was saying, I said misconceptions around the NDP Act on the part of the data subjects themselves is basically they are not necessarily aware. But for the data controllers and data processors. That is the people that actually have value for, gets value for the data they collect. One of the misconceptions is that the law is just a fine piece of writing, that there's no basically enforcement that comes with it. But this is a misconception that is gradually changing, because you've now started seeing that, from the NDPC and also from the courts in the country, you've started seeing fines that come out from it. So recently there was a 15 million naira fine by the High Court against the bank for use of a consumer's data without, just giving him advertising messages, even when he has actually said that he does not want that. And we also see from NDPC themselves, that's the regulator, where we started giving fines also to banks, and saying you have to use people's data according to what the law says. So the misconception is that there's really no benefit in following the law because they do not enforce it. And it's something that we are gradually changing, because this year there's going to be a whole lot of enforcement notice issues, and it's not just going to be money as usual, it's also going to where even the owners of those organizations that take data from people are fined. So you see CEOs having 2 years imprisonment, 1 year imprisonment, for failure to comply with the Nigerian Data Protection Act. So that's where we see the laws going and enforcement going this year and further down the line.
All right, Anna, thank you so much for that. Still on you, based on what you said, right? So while we were doing internal, myself and my team, while we were doing our internal research, we found out that a lot of African countries actually have data privacy law way before the Europe came up with a GDPR, right? And one of the things that has been a major problem with a lot of these African countries is that there was little or nothing to awareness. So a lot of people are not even aware that this data are these laws are there. They are not aware about the law. They don't know. Also, the consumers themselves don't even know about the data protection law, right? And you mentioned something about awareness. I listened to an interview that the National Commissioner gave on channels, I think about 2 months ago or thereabout, where he mentioned that even for the federal government ministries, for the Nigerian government ministries, what the commission has been able to see is a 5% shift from the use of data protection from what it was before in terms of data protection within the government ministry. What is the NDPC doing around awareness, making sure that people are aware? Now we are talking about finding businesses and CEOs and brands who are not using data right, but what's in place in terms of driving awareness to even get people to know about the laws and the regulation and what they need to do in terms of business and marketing guys generally?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Victor. So I'll start with the questions on public institutions, because this is a question we always get. Like, you want to be fining the private institutions. What about your own people? And I'll give us a brief history. So when we first started, compliance with Nigeria Data Protection law, basically, because it was not the Act, it was the NDPR, was about 4%. Now we are seeing it at 13%, and this is just in 2 years. So what we've done as a commission is that we realized that we can't do it alone. So the first thing that's up is collaboration. So what we did was we collaborated with the private stakeholders. We did this in the form of licensing what we call the data protection compliance organizations. These organizations are basically the foot soldiers of NDPC. They are the ones that actually go to organizations that use data and take them through the process of complying with the Act. So they are the ones that will find them. They are the ones that will do the compliance processes with them, or take them through the compliance.
Hi, Ada. Hello, Ada. Okay, I think
that would also come back.
Hi, Ada. We can hardly hear you. There's been
data
okay. I'm not sure. Hello, Ada. I don't know if you can hear me. We can hardly hear you. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Ada. We at some point again network problem. I am so sorry about this. There's been a
Yes. So I think I'll keep my answers very, very brief so that at least I can be heard and we can answer the question. So as I was saying, so we license private stakeholders. Those are the DPCOs, and they go into, they're basically the foot soldiers that go, to these organizations. And then we've leveraged on a lot of collaborations with other government agencies. You realize that data protection is not just Data Protection Commission. So things, organizations like the CBN, the FCCPC, the NCC, they also have people that they regulate that actually use people's data. And we've been able to go into collaborations. We have about, I think, 8 MOUs with some of these government organizations and even the private, organizations, saying, okay, you have people that are under you. How do you ensure that these people protect the data or safeguard the data that they use? So we have multi-stakeholder participations where we bring people together, tell them. So you do some sort of train the trainers. So I talk to 10 persons, those 10 persons cascade down to organizations and communities around them. A very good success example or success rate is with the NCC. So we found out that you have over 50-something thousand persons that are their agents, and they actually collect data. These are the ones that probably when you want to open, register your SIM, you just go to the wayside, these POS agents and all that. And we've been able to come to some sort of collaboration in ensuring that we have training modules for this kind of people. So awareness is not just at the elitist level where people that are in the social media can see, and then people that, it's not just that. So we've also been able to go down to communities, and this is also where our DPCOs come to play, where they go to, they go down to the grassroots. I remember there was a time that we had to go to one state, Ekiti, and where we went to, I didn't believe, so we've been able to see how we can even, move down to those places. We are also doing some sort of collaboration with the federal government. I think a particular agency, we are working with the local governments, I don't know what it's called right now, but trying to see how we can establish some sort of privacy champions in, the local governments across Nigeria. And this is, these things are not just, it's not just in the thinking phase. They are already in the ideation, beyond ideation stage. You're already in trying to implement it, trying to see how it can work. So 2 things. One is collaboration with our private stakeholders in the form of the data protection compliance organizations. We've also had a whole lot of multi-stakeholder participation to seeing how it can affect. So we were also realized that when you're working in data protection space, it's not just the general basic data. So what I'll be telling someone that works in the marketing space, like, maybe the kind of data you take, marketing data analysis and all that, is going to be different from somebody that probably is working in the banking sector. So we've also been able to delineate our laws, having guidelines, advisories on how it can specifically work in such sectors. So that's what the Nigerian Data Protection Commission has been doing for a while in terms of awareness and making everyone understand, the necessity of the kind of data they hold.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ada. Okay, I'm coming to you now. So Ada's talked about how what the government is doing on the regulatory from the regulatory side. On the business side, right? What can you advise, or what are the common mistakes that you think a lot of businesses make when handling consumer data, and how do you think they can avoid this? How do you advise that they avoid some of these common mistakes?
Thank you, Victor. I think the common one is that people think that data regulation and the NDPC only applies to only applies to big businesses, and that somehow small businesses are shielded. But that's not the case, because the fines are real and they exist both for big and small businesses in different tiers. Just the same way a lot of people feel like our country should leave small businesses alone and focus on big businesses and whatnot. So I think that misconception, first of all, should be busted straight away, so that people don't get caught up with flouting the regulation. But more importantly, the bigger areas that you will find in terms of mistakes business are making is over collection, is what we see mostly. Sometimes businesses are trying to run, it could be a campaign, a registration campaign, sign up campaign, and you look at the form fields and they're collecting data that is not relevant to anything you're trying to do on the one hand. And then that can then be used wrongly, and the consumer is able to establish that, well, you're collecting this data and it starts to look like you're discriminating against one type of consumer or the other. So you see that happening a lot. And then sometimes these businesses also then have a bloated view of the consumer beyond the scope of the service that they are offering. And all of those things kind of raise a lot of red flags between consumer trust in terms of why you're asking for A, B, C, D if it's not relevant to the service you're trying to render to me on the one hand. And then you also have just general poor practices with businesses that do not have any data governance system in place, either because they feel they're not big enough or they don't really collect that much data. We've seen instances where even as CPGs, people will argue, but we don't deal with the consumers directly. It's our third parties that deal with them. So we don't really need to be too concerned. But that's not the case, because it then brings into conversation the concept of data controller versus data processor and so on and so forth. Whichever side you fall on, it is still your responsibility as a business to adhere to regulations and compliantly collect, store, and utilize data, whether it's yours or you're collecting on behalf of a third party. I give you a typical example in my world, where we work with activation agencies who we have commissioned to go into markets, go into the public to engage with consumers on our behalf, and they collect data. But these agencies feel like the data is theirs because they are the ones directly interacting with the consumer. But no, you're just helping us process the collection of that data. It's not necessarily theirs. So if we didn't have proper governance structures around ensuring that we have data sharing agreements to be able to remind and educate our partners that such data does not belong to you, but belongs to the commissioner of that collection itself, you will see that there will be wrong utilization of data in such instances, right? Where third-party agencies thinking, oh, it's ours, so we can do whatever we want to do with it, and so on and so forth. So I guess understanding the concept of compliance in terms of collection and utilization, understanding the concept of who is the controller, who is the processor here, and how you interact with data subjects, all of this, not just from a senior management perspective, but distilling that into organization and every person that would somehow be involved in the handling of consumer or citizen data in one way or the other, making it a point of duty as an organization to educate all stakeholders about how to handle, will be one of those strategic shifts that a business will make in order to avoid these little mistakes that I've just highlighted. So I think the mistake is really undermining the importance of data governance, data education, data control, and adherence to regulation across the various sizes of business, not just big, but big, small. Whether you're starting 10-man, 5-man business with only 100 customers, the law still applies.
Fantastic. I know this brings me to my next question. Still on you, Oti. And you said something about small businesses. Small business, when they're starting out, what you're trying to do is just survive. Just try to be afloat, right? So now you're also telling them that, look, they need to also be very conscious of the kind of data that they collect and how they manage those data. So again, I'm asking you, for small and medium-sized businesses who obviously do not have a very large team to now dedicate somebody as the special person to handle compliance, right? So how do you advise that they protect customer data efficiently and comply with the laws?
Yeah, good question. I think if you enter any company today, there is always one unofficial role that is acquainted to somebody, which is usually the health and safety role, right? As far as you are operating in a physical space where there's potential to be hazard, which could be fire or injury or whatever, there's usually like a health and safety officer, right? It's not like they appoint when they employ you, they said you'll be the health and safety officer, but they just kind of either do general training and appoint one person, that person now gets further training and that becomes part of their remit, and so on and so forth. The same attitude is needed when it comes to data, right? You need to have a data champion, regardless of the size of your business. It's big, small, whatever. It could be the person who is closest to understanding a bit of the ecosystem around data and data regulation. It could be the legal person, it could be the compliance person, or whatever. Small businesses usually wouldn't have compliance, but it will have legal. It could be the chief operating officer, whoever is close to having a broad visibility of all that's happening within the organization. Appoint a data champion, let them be very conversant with the regulation, especially when it comes to regulations coming from, in Nigeria, NDPC, for example, right? They often publish their updated regulations, acts, and decisions, and so on and so forth, especially the GID that was just released last month. That's heavily publicized. So anyone who's interested can easily find it. And there are platforms that have summarized what it takes in case it's too voluminous for people. They've summarized the key aspects that affect business. So have a data champion that is conversant with these laws, and it's almost like the gatekeeper for when there is going to be the collection of data or the utilization of data that people can run with. That person works in collaboration with either your in-house legal team or your external legal consultant, if you have any, just to be sure that you're compliant. Then I would also say minimize what you're collecting as a small business. It's tempting. You want to create that long form, collect all data, because one smart techie in there has said the more data we have, the more magic we can do. But minimize, because you're going to collect what you don't need. And just that one extra piece of data that you collected and wrongly used can bring trouble upon you when a consumer feels like, well, why am I being addressed as madam? For some reason, that could be a problem to a consumer, right? Whereas I don't want to be addressed as madam, or why are you sending me Merry Christmas information when I don't need to because of my religion or whatever. So always collect and utilize in a way that doesn't trigger consumers to make them want to act differently. Why have you collected my phone number when, to be able to do what I want to do with you, you only need my email, and now you're sending me messages I didn't opt into, type of thing. So consent management and all that still comes from that basic principle of collect only what you need to be able to do what you want to do, and inform the consumer about that. It kind of keeps trouble away from the doors as a small business, and it also saves you cost in terms of data handling and data management as well. So I think overall, that would be my recommendation for small businesses that are looking to comply.
Thank you very much, Oti. Before we continue, please, I want to mention this and bring to the attention of our audience, our live audience this morning. Marketing Analytics Africa is putting together a conference. It's called the Africa Marketing Technology and E-commerce Conference. It's holding on the 24th of May at the Landmark Event Center, VI Lagos. It promises to be very interesting. We have lineup of fantastic speakers who are going to be speaking on every aspect of marketing and AI, consumer behavior. Trust me, it's going to be something that it's a place you should totally be at. Plus, it's a Saturday, so there's no rush of, oh, okay, I have one deadline I need to meet with my boss at the office, right? So let's come together and learn from some of the experts within the industry. We're also going to be talking about data protection, AI, consumer behavior, campaign planning and execution. So a whole lot. If you have not registered, please go on the website www.amtech.africa. I repeat, www.amtech.africa. Thank you very much. Okay, moving forward. Right. So brings me to my next question. Oti, I'm still going to come to you on this. Why Ada, we have something to contribute on this as well. So in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of buzz and noise around AI and AI tool, and you see a lot of businesses are beginning to adopt AI into their business and marketing efforts. Right. So with AI tools becoming very common in marketing, how should businesses ensure AI-powered data handling stays within the limits of data privacy?
Right, interesting question. It's definitely the buzz now, and it wouldn't go away. It's kind of the optimal justification of all the things we've been saying about data collection today. AI is kind of the easiest way to show working, if that makes sense. Um, and with AI, it's always less about the output and more about the input, which is what data are you using to train your AI, and how is that data collected, from who is it collected, and are they aware that their data is being used to train your AI or feed your AI, and so on and so forth. So I guess I would look at it in three buckets of the collection itself, and then the process of using it for AI, and the output. The output has no impact, because if you get the first and two right, the output will solve itself from a compliance perspective. If we look at the collection or the input itself, there is a lot that businesses need to do. For example, or for instance, the first thing is, don't use data that you haven't been given the authorization to use to train your AI. So if a consumer says, I'm giving you data to be able to give me a particular service, you have no explicit right to suddenly start to use that to train data. You need to inform the consumer, and they need to have the option to agree that, yes, you can use my data to train AI, or not, right? So that needs to be clearly established from a collection perspective. There's no implied consent in that. It needs to be clearly established. So for example, today there are people who are building agents and so on and so forth off the back of the way people are interacting with their digital services. And they'll be like, oh, we have the smartest agent because it looks like 1 billion data points of consumers. Are those consumers, or are those customers aware that their interaction is being used? So today, if you log into Gmail or Facebook and all that, they clearly ask you that, hey, would you like us to use your data to train our systems? If you opt out, then you are one less data source that they consider, type of thing. So that needs to be explicitly managed. And then in terms of the utilization itself, two things that must be established is explainability and auditability. If a third party comes to audit your AI systems, can you clearly explain how you've gotten the data and how the data is being used? And can a third party audit that process end to end, where it's not hidden what you're doing with the data? I think those two elements, when properly managed and covered, will kind of enhance regulatory compliance in the world of AI that we found ourselves in today.
Thank you. Ada, over to you. So from the regulatory point of view, right, from the regulatory standpoint, how do you ensure that businesses don't use consumer data wrongly, in terms of, like Oti rightly said, feed your data application without getting the right, making sure that they have the right kind of consent? So how do regulatory ensure that data are being used rightly, not wrongly for AI purposes?
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to be strictly in answering from regulatory aspect and exactly what is happening now. From the government or the regulatory aspect, one of the things, well, one of the ways actually you can actually ensure, that AI is being used accurately well, is having in place regulations or guidelines or strategies about it. currently in Nigeria, we have a draft version of the national AI strategy. Its ambition is basically to leverage AI for socio-economic development and technological advancements. Now, what we try to do with this draft strategy, and of course, even across not just Nigeria, in other countries where there are already bills, or there are even national agencies for AI and AI laws and regulations. The idea for especially African countries, which is very nascent, AI development is very nascent in African countries, is that from the beginning, from the development, creation, ideation, and all that, you have these principles, these data protection principles infused in it, and you also have ethics infused in AI. Why this is very important is that because we are basically learning from what's happening in advanced countries, and what you have that is obtainable there is to ensure that when you're building on your own, you already have these principles embedded. So when that is already done through regulatory provisions that mandates that you should have all these data protection, you have things like privacy by design, privacy by default, you ensure that you have all this already embedded, or you actually think of it in the ideation stage first. So from the ideation to the use of that AI, or the deployment and then the use of that AI, you're going to be seeing through that journey that data protection principles and laws have been infused directly in it. And that's what regulations across African countries are basically doing. So and then of course, even at the continental level, you have the continental AI strategy, you have the African Digital Compact. So what this also do is, even if some countries do not have these strategies at the national level, but you have a unified approach amongst the continent on the complexities of the AI driven change. We're also focusing on AI governance and regulation, addressing those risks that are associated with AI. Like the other speaker talked about, OT, he talked about, it's what you actually give into the AI. So once you get it right at that beginning stage, the outputs for the AI will not necessarily have a problem. So also ensuring that you have strategic provisions in the law, and then also make sure that these are implemented across board.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I'll quickly go into the comment section, take one comment, then I'll come back and ask. Okay, so I see that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's already replied that. Okay. Let me take Callisto's comments. So Callistus is asking, what process and guide would you share for a payment processing company to remain compliant with NDPC law when dealing with customer and data subjects? That question goes to you, Ada.
Thank you for the question. So the NDP Act and the General Application and Implementation Directive are very good resources for anyone, regardless of the sector that you're in. Of course, we also work with the CBN, which I guess is also the main regulator for payment processing device. So the CBN also has laws on data, or guidelines on data protection and all that. So these are kind of laws that you can look into to ensure that you're compliant with the act. So places of the general principles, the legal basis, which is something that the other speaker has always been mentioned, or almost been hammering on, the idea that you have to have data minimization processes all around, and then so your legal basis, your principles, and the awareness of the data subjects and their rights that accrue to them. These are the things that you look at to ensure that you're compliant with the Nigerian Data Protection Act. Also, I think one of the foundation compliance for any organization is registration with the Nigerian Data Protection Commission, and also, where applicable, also filing your data protection audits.
Thank you. So I have another question here, quick one from Wale. So it's two questions, so I'm just going to merge the two together. So Wale is asking, what's the punishment for organization that default? Is there currently any enforced? Is there enforcement presently? Is it being enforced presently in Nigeria? how is this being enforced presently in Nigeria?
Okay, so yes, the enforcement mechanisms in the law. So you have from complaints, investigation, judicial reviews, warnings, orders, to actually penalties. The law says 2% of the annual revenue of the company. It also, or 10 million, whichever is greater. It also says that the CEOs of the company can be given a 1-year imprisonment. So there are actually enforcement options in the law. So what is the punishment? Yeah, so those are the punishments. I'm sure you also know that there have been punishments that, or penalties that come out from when the Nigerian Data Protection Commission actually investigates and finds an organization that is not adherent or that has not complied with the law. A very good public one, which I like saying because it's in the public space, is that of Fidelity Bank, where they were fined a humongous amount of money, and it was not even up to 2% of their revenue. So yes, there are enforcement mechanisms, enforcement options, and they are being used.
All right, thank you for that. Oti, back to you. So for companies expanding into the African markets, how can they stay ahead of different compliance expectations across the various border? You will have experience in this because, again, you work across various countries. So tell us. You're muted, Uti.
Oh, my bad. Okay, cool. There was some background noise earlier. The key thing is to, first of all, have a data strategy as a business. And once you have that in place, second is to recognize that, just like I said, tax differs across borders the same way data regulation differs across borders. So have a standardized template that sort of paints a picture. Sorry, did I lose Victor? I'm not sure if it's just me or overall, but I'll carry on since I'm still here. Adama, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sorry,
Okay, cool. No problem. It felt like rapture, but yeah. So have that strategy. Recognize the difference. It's important that businesses expanding should have a template where you're able to identify the commonalities in regulation and the differences in regulation as well. So it's easy to sort of build a strategy that takes advantage of the commonalities, but also builds on the strengths of the differences as well. So in our case, for example, while we have global standards, there are certain projects where we still have to look at individual market situations to see how the regulation in those markets affect those particular projects and bake those into the plans for deployment before we go ahead. And then there's lots of local consultation happening as well. So I think it's just always have it in mind that you can have a global strategy, but you must have the local adaptation and the local elements for each market you're looking to expand to, speaking into your global strategy. It's always more efficient when you find the commonalities so that you cluster countries based on their commonalities as well. Many of them are similar, but what you find is it sometimes exists in regional blocks. So what you find in East Africa will be similar. What you find in West Africa would also be similar. And along some of these trade lines, they were very deliberate in making sure that data sharing and interoperability across markets is also favorable. So you can also kind of structure your operations around that as well if you're very heavy when it comes to data processing. So I think it's just having that template and recognizing local alignments or local differences as you deploy.
Thank you very, very much. As we begin to run down, one last question from the audience, and then we have the final words from our guest this afternoon. So I'm going to take on Chidima. So Chidima is asking Ada if there is a document where one can gain in-depth knowledge of on that publicly in terms of data regulation. I believe.
Okay, well, I think the act and the guide is enough document. If you can read those documents, it's a lot. Especially the guide. The guide is very wide, covers a lot. It tries to simplify what the act says, and also gives you an insight to what the regulator is thinking about when he says do this or do that. So I think it's a very good document that everyone should try to read. You also see that there are templates in the documents and the guide that can also help you in your data processing activities as an organization. Yeah. So
Thank you, Ada, for that. Also, looking ahead, still on you, Ada. So looking ahead, what's
I think Oti wants to say something.
Oh, okay, Oti.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the truth is, once you say policies, acts, people run away because those documents are usually very long, right? So my hack is two things. On the one hand, use AI, use any of the generative AI tools we have there, like ChatGPT, if you have a subscription that allows you to crawl the internet for latest content, or if you don't, use something like Perplexity. You can just ask questions specifically about any bits of the regulations that you want, and it will summarize and give to you, right? Because especially Perplexity picks documents, the free version will pick documents as recent as 48 hours ago, right? So you can definitely use that to query and get specific portions explained for you. The other part is there is a platform called Mondak, MONDAQ, that I rely on a lot. You can subscribe to their newsletters or just read their articles on the website, but they take these complex documents and simplify it to long didn't read versions and tell you how it applies. And any little updates to any of the documents or the acts, they would actually send out in their newsletters or in their articles just to keep people updated. The fines, everything, they're all clear. With clear examples of companies that have been fined, that's one good resource where you can find that as well. So I think all in all, those will be good resources to consult.
Fantastic. Okay, so last question, and we'll call it a wrap. So looking ahead, what practical steps should businesses start taking today to future-proof their data practices and stay within the law? Who wants to go first?
Oh, okay. You were already feeding it into Adama, so maybe she should go first.
Since you are here, so
okay, might as well. Yeah. So for me, I think it's getting familiar with regulation first of all, right? As long as you collect personal data from consumers, either through your website or your product or anything, or even physically people come to your business and they have to fill a document to sign a receipt and all that. As long as you collect data that is used to identify a human being, get familiar with regulation and start to put in place practices that will help you compliantly collect, store, and utilize that data without any assumptions. Assumptions is the biggest cause of trouble when it comes to data. You need full clarification in every aspect of data compliance. So use some of the tools I had mentioned earlier to just ask questions. I'm a small business. I sell electronics down the road. People come to my shop and they enter their details when they're paying for things, or they do transfer and I get hold of their details and so on and so forth. How does this affect me? These are things you can ask AI specifically as I'm in Nigeria and so on and so forth. And it would actually explain the steps and actions you can take to protect yourself, know when you need to go and register with the NDPC and so on and so forth. And also think about the consumer. What value, if you believe that data is going to be useful to your business, what value can you exchange to increase the chances of getting the consent that you desire? Because most people are by default designed to decline consent. So what value can you offer to them as a way of increasing the chances of getting consent to collect the data that you need? That will be my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ada.
Well, I think I said because it's basically knowing the law. For you to ensure compliance is to know what is expected of you for compliance. So it's to know the law. And I will always say, even if you think you are a small company, there must be somebody. I think most often than not, there's always a lawyer, and lawyers, one of the backbones of lawyers is reading. Do you understand? So they can easily read these documents or read these laws and tell you where you may need to adjust your business or where you may need to comply, whatever it is. So I think the first thing is to read or to know about the law. So once you know about the law, it's easy for you to now start telling yourself to start doing. And NPC for us we are very big on efforts. So whether it's a big company or it's a small company, when we see that you have started something, so it's not as if you're not able, you're saying, I don't want to do anything, there's nothing they can do, but we have seen effort, so we kind of reward efforts. You see that okay, you may not necessarily know, but some of the organizations that probably maybe people may have reported them, or even by ourselves, we see that there's a breach or something happens. When we see the efforts that they've put in place, we tell them, okay, it's not a matter of fine, this is a matter of maybe more knowledge. So we actually kind of train them, give them basic trainings on what it is that we've seen that they lack and how they should go about in rectifying it. So it's just knowledge, it's just getting to know the law and what is expected of you.
Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic conversation this beautiful afternoon. And thank you so much, Oti. Thank you, Ada, for being here this afternoon. And for our audience, thank you so much for being here as well. The video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel after the later on the week, and we'll share. If you have registered on, again, so we are talking about, if you are registered proud to this event, you'll definitely be getting a link from us on where to go see it. But if you have not, please go and do that registration right now so that we can share the full footage with you after the webinar. Thank you very much for coming. Once again, we have our events coming up, Amtech at the Landmark Event Center on the 24th of May. You should totally be there. It's an event that if you are a business person doing marketing in Nigeria, you need to be there. We have fantastic lineup of speakers who are going to be talking on various aspects, from AI to consumer marketing to consumer behavior to digital marketing. It's going to be a very interesting conversation happening, and we have some great partners from Indomie to AI to Colgate, Dutchell, Cybertron, and Legit. So come around, come and network, as well as learn from guys who are doing practical things within our ecosystem. Thank you very much once again to everyone that has joined in, and thank you to our speaker most importantly. Have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, and have a good day.